Have a great story for you guys. Would like feedback of what you think. So, I was referred to this subreddit by a friend, as this story is like the perfect fit for here. All names/details of people will be changed/hidden as is common courtesy. My story begins at the beginning of this summer. RDM had grown just a little bit tired of our normal campaign, and with many people out of school for the summer, it was agreed upon to have a 8-week intermission campaign that would have no effect on the other world. RDM decides to make this funner, and tells us that in addition to whatever we would get starting at level 5, we get to choose/design/work with one superpower, and we had 2 weeks to figure it out with him. I made mine simple. Unlike the common requests of time control and instant teleportation anywhere, I asked for Mr. Incredible levels of strength. The DM found it hilarious and simple, so he buffed my strength stat to 60. It was hilarious, and strangely, this didn't end up being a direct problem. Other people ended up with lucky perk x10, or someone tried to copy me, so their dex got bumped to 30 because AC. However, we had one player that on our session 0 announced his power. It was that when a fellow party member died, not enemies, just party, he would get to consume their stats and add them directly to his. Knowing this player 4 years before, this gave everyone the chills, and it was deathly quiet for the rest of session 0. Post game, many of us confronted the DM with concerns, to which the reply was I know, trust me on this. With how hard he fought me on previous worse abilities, I just gave up. My thought is that you guys can't die unless I say so. So hopefully, he remains useless for the 8 weeks. Narrator, he did not remain useless. The very first game, very first combat, we are fighting these large dinosaur-like creatures. A challenging fight for us superhero gods, with the whole save a city subplot going on. I'm getting whacked hard as the tank fighter, and I got bloodied. The very next round, our rogue, the guy with absorption powers, declares that he sees me weak, and backstabs plus ACTIO and Surge Multiclass finishes me off, and proceeds to ignore the fight, to absorb my stats strength. At this point, impissed, multiple party members are backing off from the now awry fight, and RDM has gone silent. The session continued, and the roleplay broke, and people started getting mad at this player for essentially screwing the whole game up, killing a party member for personal gain. His response was to kill the other rogue with 30 dex, and hold all other players hostage, to do as he says in game, or he will kill your character. RDM finally intervenes, after having probably been pissed on his end, and tells him that if he doesn't get his crap together, he will boot him from the game then and there. Having finally been threatened, the player backs down into oh but this is funny right? I mean I have 72 SDR now, right guys? I can solo anything. Players started dropping off the Discord at this point, and I have been 100% quiet up till then. A week passes, and apparently RDM talked to him in person about how unacceptable that was, and that he wants him to change his power as he is clearly being aggressive to party due to it. Player promises that if he can keep it, he won't do it again. Narrator, he did it again. Over the next week, people received messages from the player telling them his character's actions next game with them, which basically came down to you are going to do what I want now. After the 6 other players and me gathered, we talked to the DM, and our campaign got called off. And that's the end of it. Good times. For those of you who were going to ask, problem player and DM are related, so he wasn't about to kick him permanently off. To DMs, a brief note about tournament arcs in D&D. DMs, please do not write a tournament arc into your D&D game. If you do make a tournament, please have it be a grand melee where the entire party can participate. If it's not a grand melee, please don't divide the melee and ranged competitions to separate in game days. If you do divide the melee and ranged competitions, please hold them in separate sessions so the players don't have to just sit and watch other people for an extended period of time. If you're going to have all the players watch each other compete, make sure they have equal challenges. So make the archery more than 3 sets of skill checks, and make the reward for each side of the tournament equal, so that the archers don't feel like secondless players. And please don't run the melee portion as a bracket. It will take forever, And don't make the archers wait until 2 hours into the session before they get to participate in anything. But if you're going to have a bracket, I guess it's more tolerable that it's the smallest bracket ever with only 6 NPCs. Still, you don't have to divide this tiny bracket into multiple days in game. But speaking of NPCs, please run them as a stat block rather than as character sheets. And if you do decide to make sheets for each NPC, please make sure the math is correct on the sheets. And make sure you know how to play those classes so that you're not reading their basic features out of the PHB during combat. And if you give an NPC to the wizard's player so that they have something to do, please don't smugly root against that player once they are in combat. And please, dear DMs, once the players are doing the PvP combat you engineered, do not pull out your phone and check out of what's going on. Don't roll your eyes and call it tedious when this is what you planned. The Bard's ADHD player had nothing to do for hours and had no negativity about the whole thing, so the least you could do is stay engaged. But for one quick way to avoid all these problems, DMs, please do not write a tournament arc into your D&D game. Edit. Due to out-of-game relationship drama, this campaign is on hiatus. I can't say that I'm sorry about this particular consequence. The stupidity of some players. So my sister is doing her first campaign and our large party 9 PCs comes to a giant lake with a small island at its center. On the island there is a statue holding a magical crystal, which is what we are here to find. As some of the party begins to wade out into the water, they are attacked by snakes, piranha and giant leeches. Most of them return to shore, but our rogue keeps going, taking damage all the while. Our male ranger tries to shoot leeches off of the returning members with his flaming arrows. I hastily convince him this is a bad idea. At this point I decide to leave as these psychos are going to get me killed, but our cleric talks me out of leaving. Our male ranger decides to shoot an arrow into the statue with a rope attached, which sucks. I volunteer to try and cross it as I'm a halfling bard with a high dex. So as I'm tightrope walking out to the island, a giant fish emerges from the lake. It snaps the rope and I land on its back. I start to sneak down its back towards the island and our rogue is paddling along beside it, now in the deeper water where he's not being attacked. The fish is ignoring us both and addresses those on shore, telling them to leave its territory. Now this fish has been described as so large that it blots out sight of the mountain ranges on the other side of the lake. So what do those on shore do? Stall so the two of us can steal the crystal? No, of course not. They decide to attack. Battle ensues and they are having trouble hitting the fish as its scales are too hard. We are level 2 BTW. So our fighter decides that since we can't get through the scales, it would be easier to fight from inside the fish and promptly throws himself down its throat. Shortly he is followed by our male ranger and our sorcerer, who feel like this is a good idea. At this point our female ranger throws down her bow and says fuck this, I'm out, and walks back into the forest we came from. Our remaining party on shore, our cleric, monk and barbarian, are flabbergasted as Army and the rogue. My sister calls me over and asks me what the hell to do, as she was not expecting people to throw themselves down the fish's throat. I tell her it's up to her what to do. She could make it easier to hit from the inside if she wants. But if it were me, I would not reward such stupidity. I told her there were rules for being swallowed for purple worms. So we look it up and find they will almost likely be killed instantly. So she decides to have them take 10 acid damage around at the begging of their turns. The barbarian gets a high diplomacy check asking the fish to return their idiot friends, and so my sister has the fish attempt to regurgitate them. They try to remain inside and contest being regurgitated and succeed. The cleric attempts to heal them in unconventional ways, but she is not successful, and in 3 rounds the ranger and sorcerer are unconscious and the fighter is barely holding on. The rogue and I are swimming back with a crystal and can do nothing to help. Finally, with a heaved sigh, the monk ties a rope around herself, gives the other end to the barbarian and cleric, and dives in after the 3 Morans. She manages to pull out the sorcerer and ranger, and by this time the fighter is unconscious and the fish is able to regurgitate him. We find out by talking to the fish that he has been cursed to guard the crystal by an evil witch. We kill said witch, break the curse, and get the crystal.